Alright guys, we are here for the fifth and final review of God's Not Dead. It's called God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. Believe it or not, this one is actually more Christian nationalist, white Christian nationalist than the last one in my opinion. I didn't think that was possible, but here we are. First of all, I had to rent this movie, which I was really sad about. $3.75, which feels like a lot for a movie like this. I normally watch them on Tubi. It wasn't on Tubi for some reason. I think it's considered a PureFlix exclusive movie. If you don't know what PureFlix is, I think it's just like a streaming or like a, I don't know what you want to call it, for basically Christian movies, okay? And I really didn't want to subscribe to PureFlix, but I think I'm gonna have to. I think it's only like $2 a month, but it's still too much in my opinion to give these people. But I think I have to continue to review these movies because a lot of these movies aren't anywhere else, or I would have to rent them every single time. And I don't want to do that. Anyways, let's get into it. Of course, we start off with breaking news, very exciting news. A congressional incumbent in this movie is pronounced dead from a heart attack, and the other guy running is now unopposed. And the guy running unopposed is the evil atheist lawyer from movie 2. If you remember him, he was basically an evil, terrible, awful guy because he was an atheist, and you know how that goes. So just what a way to start the movie. Now they show the atheist evil lawyer. He goes by Senator Kane. I just never said his name because I just referred to him as evil atheist lawyer. So Senator Kane is being asked questions by press straight out the gate. Questions like this.
Pass laws to restrict religious freedoms and support bigger government.
That's enough questions.
Here we go, straight to the point, getting at it right away. Now we are seeing a compilation of speeches setting a very patriotic tone. Added into this inspirational speech compilation are speeches from Dave, that I guess they thought he ate with, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in this like little opening scene here. We have kids being vaccinated. They have evolution being written on a chalkboard.
Without God,
I guess they're showing like everything they think is horrific in the country, because they have evolution written on the chalkboard because of what I explained earlier. A lot of these people are young earth creationists. They don't believe in evolution. They don't believe in science. They think the earth is like 6,000 years old. Some of them don't believe dinosaurs existed. Some of them think dinosaurs existed with humans, blah, 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 blah. So they don't like evolution being taught in schools. They show a kid marking off the answer atheist for some reason.
material, that flat world that tells us
I guess they're teaching our kids to be atheists. Then of course they show people burning the American flag and churches. And then they show the destruction of a statue. Which I can only assume is one of those Confederate monuments that people want taken down or have destroyed in the past. These Confederate statues they just care so much about, I guess. Damn, we're off to a crazy start. I mean, this is a wild start. Just hitting all the hot button issues with Christian nationalism right away. We're not wasting any time in this movie. Now they're showing Dr. Burke with his homies. Dr. Burke, if you remember from the last movie, it's the actor who plays Dr. Burke in Grey's Anatomy. He goes by Congressman Smith, I think. So this congressman is in the office with his homies, and they're watching a video of Dave from the last movie give his speech to Congress where they think he ate it up. So they're watching this speech together, and they're like, damn, this guy's amazing. We need to have him run for Congress against Senator Kane. And then they said he's fighting for the soul of our nation. So it's pretty serious. Now we jump to see Pastor Dave talking to a woman who looks homeless with her baby. And he's saying, sorry, the government was supposed to be funding this woman's shelter, but they haven't. And she says, we do not feel safe in the women's shelter in the city. I'm not exactly sure what they were doing with this, but to me it seemed like she didn't feel safe in a secular woman's shelter, and she only felt safe in the Christian one that he was running. His shelter is being run like in a church, and she makes it seem like she's just only comfortable in the Christian one, I guess. Okay, so now we see Martin. You guys know Martin. He was in the past 4 movies. He is talking to Pastor Dave about how they lost their funding from the government for this women's shelter because a single woman was found having a Bible study in the shelter. because that just sounds very realistic that the United States government punishes people for being Christian, even though you guys know the drill, like we are a Christian nation. It's so weird, like we're so persecuted, but at the same time we're a Christian nation. That's like their narrative. It's so doesn't make any sense. But also the fact that we like swear in all of our government officials with the Bible, most of them, you don't have to anymore. Most of our government officials are sworn in with their religious texts, including the President of the United States. But yeah, our government at the same time wants to punish people for being Christian. Makes a lot of sense. Now we have Martin talking about how oppressive China is to Christians, something that is constantly brought up now in these movies, about how China is so oppressive towards Christians. I told you guys this would be a main theme when I saw the person from China come into the picture, because this is something evangelicals talk about a lot. Martin is essentially saying that if we're not careful, we're going to end up like China, because, we're just like so on the brink of throwing Christians in camps.
So no, I don't think you're being paranoid.
I'm done.
It's just crazy. Now we meet a woman named Lottie. Lottie works with Dr. Burke as a political consultant, and she's trying to talk Pastor Dave into running for Congress, saying that the country doesn't need another politician. The country needs someone like him, aka a pastor. She says that Senator Kaine is trying to defund any institution that has anything to do with religion, even if they are an organization that provides needs to people. So, he's doing his evil atheist thing. Then Lottie, the political consultant, runs into another political consultant she knows who was working for Senator Kaine at this, hotel. And he just is so weird. Saying a lot of, sexual harassment type stuff to her. And he does this weird thing where he comments on her weight and, tries to say she gained weight. I don't know why they put this in there. So weird. Well, I do know why. They're like, hey, this side is bad, this side is evil. Don't listen to these people. They're evil, they're bad, and they're mean to women. Now we have Dr. Burke calls Dave to try and get him to run for Congress, and he says to Dave to try to convince him, because Dave is basically says something along the lines of being weary of running for Congress. And Dr. Burke says people are afraid of the truth because it might get them canceled. Cringe. And then Dr. Burke tells him he's a pastor, so he's in the business of truth. And then Dave is like, I don't know if this is for me. And then Dr. Burke tells him to pray on it. Then Dave has a change of heart. I guess he prayed on it. Because now he's going to find Lottie before she flies out of town. Because I guess she came here just to get Dave to run for Congress and run his campaign. And so he goes to tell her he'll do it. He'll run for Congress. She's happy and responds with, "Let's save this country."
Stop. I can't take any more. I can't do this.
Then Senator Kaine's political, manager tells him that somebody is running up against him, aka Pastor Dave. And he responds with,
I remember him.
The Bible thumper.
And then his political consultant says, get ready to do the whole separation of church and state thing. Okay? And then they show a Newsboys concert, because you gotta have a Newsboys concert. If you guys remember what's currently going on with Michael Tate from the Newsboys, it's not good. That's all I can think about now when I see him. So them, really, really focusing on him out of all the Newsboys, yikes. Dave and Michael Tate are interacting at some point. They give a hug. They're besties, I guess. Another yikes. Then Dave goes on a news show. And I guess the Newsboys were opening for this news show. I guess it's maybe supposed to be a talk show. I'm not exactly sure. Dave is being interviewed by Dave is being interviewed by Mike Huckabee. So, remember how I said I wasn't exactly sure a lot about Micah Huckabee? It's interesting because controversy with him has been coming out as of recently, where basically, to my understanding, he had a meeting with someone named Jonathan Pollard, who was convicted of spying for Israel, and nobody knew about it. Like, it wasn't on his official public schedule. He, like, did it in secret, so people were like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's weird. So that's fun. That's the recent controversy with Mike Huckabee. So anyways, Dave tells Huckabee that he just wants to represent the people, but not force his religion on other people. He doesn't want to do this. This would be proven untrue in the last... This is proven to be untrue in the last couple of movies, where he they do this thing, right, where they keep saying, I don't want to force my religion onto anybody, guys. That's not what I want. But then they quite literally argue for that in different scenes, or even in the same scene. It's crazy. Like, in the last movie, they kept on saying, like, Christianity should be put in public schools. It shouldn't be separated from the government. Like, this is a Christian nation, so we need to go by Christianity when it comes to our laws and our government, kind of like to try and sugarcoat it, where they're like, we don't want to force our religion on you. But this is a Christian nation and we want Christian nationalism. Now Sketchy asked Mike Huckabee, he says there are actually more ordained ministers in Congress now more than ever. And he asks Dave why that is, and Dave says things like the pandemic has led more people to spirituality or religion. Then Huckabee asked Dave how he feels about the separation of church and state. Here we go. And Dave says it's actually just reduced to a catchphrase, as much as nobody wants to admit it. And like, my question is, how is talking about the separation of church and state a catchphrase? Saying separation of church and state is a catchphrase? I don't know. That was very weird. Dave says the separation of church and state can be pretty blurry sometimes, and that we are all made with mortal bodies and immortal souls, and as long as we're still breathing, where do we draw that line? I don't even know I don't even know what he meant by that, genuinely. Like, what does that even mean? Also, we don't even agree that we all have souls. Like, I don't think we have a soul. The reason I don't think we have a soul is because there just isn't proof of a soul. The soul, I think, is like a concept human beings came up with because it's hard for us to understand, or hard for us to conceptualize that we are just our brains. We're just our, like, thoughts and stuff like that. So me personally, I don't believe in a soul. So I feel like there are a decent amount of people who don't even agree with the premise of what he's saying, even though in general, I don't even know what he's trying to say there. Okay, now we're at this scene that is supposed to basically be an ad for Senator Kane. And it seems to me like they're showing January 6th. Senator Kane is basically saying that he is fighting against extremists. And it's interesting to me that they're like aligning themselves with January 6ers. That's how I interpreted it. Like, that's who they're aligning themselves with, which is an interesting thing to do. But again, this is like a Christian nationalist movie. This to me is a very MAGA movie without having Donald Trump literally in the movies. Now both Senator Kane and Pastor Dave are shown agreeing to do a live podcast together. So Lottie, the political, like, manager, warns Dave not to talk about Christianity so much. And, you know, of course, Dave doesn't take her advice because he is such a good, like, soldier for God, essentially. And they paint Kane as a super experienced politician, and Dave himself is just a pastor. I think they do this for a reason, because this is what they did with Trump. They act like being a politician, already having experience is kind of a bad thing, like, because all politicians are corrupt, therefore Trump isn't corrupt because he's just a businessman, which doesn't make any sense. You can still be corrupt as, like, a businessman, which it's been proven time and time again, he is very corrupt with his businesses for so many different reasons. So I just think this was interesting they put that in there, because I'm seeing a lot of parallels to Trump. It's in this whole movie, they paint it as if this guy is Trump, but actually cares about Christianity, if you know what I mean. Like, Trump does not care about Christianity.
But have you ever asked God for forgiveness?
I'm not sure I have. I don't think so.
In the slightest. Then Kane basically he talks about the separation of church and state, and Dave says, you know, actually, the founding fathers didn't want to keep religion out of government. They just wanted to keep government out of religion. How convenient. So before this podcast, Dave and his team agreed to do this podcast if Senator Kaine and his team agreed to a debate later on. But after the podcast, basically, it made Pastor Dave look bad to the public, I guess, or that was the opinion. And so Senator Kaine said, JK, we won't debate. They make Senator Kaine and his team look afraid to debate Pastor Dave, essentially. I also want to add, they keep adding in this movie about how, like, money runs the world, money runs the government, money runs politics, and that's why it's so corrupt, right? It's so corrupt because it's just about who has more money, and they keep saying they don't have a good chance of winning because Senator Kaine has a bunch of money, and they don't. I find that interesting because it's quite literally like the opposite with Trump, especially this past election with all the stuff Elon Musk was doing and dumping all that money in the Trump campaign. I'm like, if you actually believe that, why are you voting for somebody like Donald Trump? Like, every accusation feels like a confession with these people, and I'll say that until I'm blue in the face because that's how it feels every single time something like that is brought up. Then Dave and Lottie are at dinner together, and she basically says Dave needs to start bringing up dirt on Senator Kaine instead of talking about God. And Dave is basically like, no, I won't do that. You want me to replace God with dirt? I'm not going to do that. Which, again, is ironic because this same group of people vote for somebody who, like Donald Trump, who constantly talks bad about people. That's like his main... Anytime I hear this man talk, he is talking shit on people. He's calling people's names constantly. I've heard him say that specific groups of people aren't even human, they're animals. He called a reporter recently Piggy. Because he didn't like a question she asked. So I think it's funny that they try to put these, like, they try and make it seem like they're on the moral side while most evangelicals are voting for a guy that is quite literally a high school bully who never grew up. They show Dave getting more support because he's going out and interacting with the community a lot and talking to the common folk, you know, like Trump famously has done. Now we're watching Dave and Kaine on the news for some kind of debate, which I guess Senator Kaine changed his mind, or he's talking about a debate that happens later on that he didn't want to do. And during this debate, Dave says,
The issue isn't whether or not the government needs God, it's that you believe the government is God.
This is the whole narrative of if you don't believe in God, then you actually worship yourself and you actually made yourself your own God. To me, is such a meaningless statement. It's so freaking meaningless. To me, it's just like, because then when I ask them, like, how I think I'm a god, or, like, how I worship myself, they'll say weird, vague things like, oh, well, you trust yourself. Or, like, you make decisions for yourself or something, or rely on yourself. And I'm like, we all do that. We all, you know, we all make decisions. Like, I don't know. It's annoying because it's clearly this attempt to make people seem arrogant for not believing in God. That's it. That's all that is like, oh, you're so arrogant. You think you're your own God just because you don't believe in my God. Doesn't make any sense. It's a meaningless narrative, in my opinion. Kaine says, no, I just think the government should help people. And Dave is saying how much he hates big government, and that kind of thing breeds dependency. In a lot of this movie, it's showing that Christian nationalists doesn't support government assistance, really. Like, they don't want people to depend on the government. They don't want to help people through the government. None of that is a shock at all. And then Kaine says, you think your church can do better? And Dave says, well, yeah, we help people in ways government can't. Well, which is interesting to me because he just was complaining that the government wasn't giving them enough assistance, that the government wasn't giving them the funding they needed, therefore their shelter was, like, shut down. Like, you just said that you needed government assistance, but then you're advocating against government assistance. And then he says that the church can help people morally, and it's like, great. What about when they're starving or they don't have a place to sleep at night when it's 0 degrees outside? Anyways, then Kaine brings up Christian nationalism, and Dave fights back and says,
Whenever anyone of faith promotes a policy that you don't like, you label them. a Christian nationalist.
Which is funny because they already knew they had to fight back against the Christian nationalist label because they know it doesn't look great. And then he talks about how banning books is okay and not, and it's not, doesn't mean it's Christian nationalism. It just means that a parent is concerned.
Is she a nationalist or just a concerned parent?
I wonder if he would say the same thing about the Bible because, like, I wonder how a lot of Christian nationalists would respond if you say, hey, I think the Bible should be banned from elementary schools and middle schools because it isn't age appropriate. Because it has literally every adult theme you could ever think of in the Bible and very graphic things surrounding SA, violence, whatever. So I wonder if they would agree to that. And then Dave starts getting worked up. He starts yelling about how coaches should be able to pray before school games, and that isn't Christian nationalism. And it's like, I that's not the biggest part of like why people are upset, I feel like, with Christian nationalism. I don't think a coach praying before a game is like people's main issue, but they like to point out things that seem like not a big deal to make it seem like the people who are upset with Christian nationalism are just unreasonable for caring about it. Now we get into healthcare. Fun stuff. Can't wait to hear this. Senator Kaine says that he believes healthcare is a human right and government should provide universal healthcare, based, in my opinion. When I was watching this, I was like, something tells me Dave is not going to like this, helping people with their healthcare. Then Dave says, actually, that will just put us in more debt. We need something to empower people instead, and then suggests getting lower cost healthcare. Okay. I could just like go on a whole rant about that, but I'm gonna let that one go because I want to get through this whole review. Then Kaine talks about how Christian nationalists want to put their religion and beliefs into laws and government. And then Dave says, no, we don't. And then right after he says, no, we don't, he says our country was built on Christian principles. Why do you keep saying, no, we don't, or we don't want to push our religion onto you, and then in the next sentence you say, this is a Christian nation, Christianity should be put into our laws? And just say what you mean. Just say that, yes, I want my religion to dominate this country, and that's how I feel. Like, I feel like I would respect it more than them trying to be like, no. It's like, it's so frustrating. Again, in my opinion, it's just trying to sugarcoat it again and again and again. Trying to say it in a way that doesn't make people afraid of them taking over the government and the country. And then Kaine brings up that the "In God We Trust" and our money wasn't added until like more recent years. And then Dave says, if money offends you, spend less of it. And then he says Kaine relies on the pursuit of power and not the principles that shape this nation. And they acted like that was such a mic drop moment for Dave, like they typically do. And the host is like, quick, go to commercial. Like, we can't let the people hear this. Like, he's eating us up. If you remember, this reminds me of the exact scene in the second movie where the guy who wrote, I think it was a guy who wrote a book proving that Jesus was real. And basically the guy says, you're mistaken. I discovered Jesus was real when I was an atheist. And that was supposed to be like a mic drop moment, because then Senator Kaine, who was playing like being a lawyer in this movie, was like, oh my gosh, strike that from the record. We can't let people hear this. It's so dumb. Then Kaine catches Dave backstage and says, I will not be made a fool.
Till your so-called moral high ground crumbles beneath your feet.
This reminded me so much of the first movie with the professor and Josh in the hallway.
I'm also a jealous god, so do not try to humiliate me in front of my students.
I mean, what can I say? It's just the atheist way to go up and, like, be very confrontational with people, I guess.
I had a bowl of nails for breakfast this morning.
Yes, so?
Without any milk.
Right this way.
Now Dave is in his office and Lottie is showing him dirt she dug up on Senator Kaine, which includes some kind of fraud, bribery, financial stuff, and Dave says, no thank you, I want to win the right way, and I don't play dirty. As opposed to Donald Trump, who literally just makes up stuff about people, like, whenever he wants. Turns out the dirt on Kaine gets put out anyway. But Kane and his team claim it's not real and someone made it up. And basically they have proof to back that up. So they proved that it was fabricated. And Dave is like mad at Lottie because he thinks that she leaked it to the press, which, yeah, I think she did. And then she obviously fell for like this bait that she was supposed to take to make them look bad. And because of this, then Martin comes into Dave's office and is like, hey, the board thinks you should take a break from being the pastor of this church. And obviously that's very devastating to Dave because he's like, I didn't even want to play dirty. Like, Lottie released this, like, blah, blah, blah. So Pastor Dave is down in the dumps, and now Dr. Burke comes over to visit him to cheer him up. Long scene short, he is basically saying, like, God will put you through rough stuff, and he has to push through it. And then in this scene, he complains about the lack of involvement Christians have in politics, saying, like, it's Christian duty to basically vote, like, for us and, like, conservatives. Not enough Christians know that, and we, like, gotta get people to be more involved in politics as Christians. So after this, Dave decides to stay in the race. Okay, now we're at the final debate, guys. Kane starts by saying Dave's Bible says he cannot have two masters, therefore his religion is going to get in the way of his job because he's always going to pick God and his religion over politics. Dave says, you don't want to remove religion from government or else we'll end up like China or North Korea. We cannot let them get rid of Christianity. So he just takes a giant, huge persecution leap of like, guys don't want separation of church and state or else like you're gonna imprison us and put us into camps. Okay. And then he's like, we also don't want to be like the European socialist countries. Gasp. The amount of propaganda in this movie is so insane. And then Kane is like, Jesus' teachings, and then he's like, to Dave, he's like, wasn't Jesus' teachings about loving your neighbor? So like, don't you want to help other people? And Dave says, no. That's not what Jesus' teachings are about. Jesus' teachings are about Jesus. And the crowd loves that. And then he said, you guys only use the words of God you see from someone's Instagram bio for your own political agenda. And then he says to Kane, you're trying to remove Jesus from our schools, our culture, and our history. Then they get another spat about what our founding fathers' intentions were. And then Kane talks about universal human rights. Oh no. I mean, just what the devil wants. Universal human rights. And then Dave has a flashback of what Martin said.
They called it the Cultural Revolution.
When he said that when China started persecuting Christians, they called it a cultural revolution. Basically, OMG, we're turning into China. This is so scary. Now Dave puts his hand on the Bible. This is like an intense moment where he's like, okay, let's do this. Slapping his hand on the Bible. He goes on a rant about how our human rights come from God. Without God, our society will go to shit. And then Dave is like, do you know what would happen if all Christians voted? He does, pointing to Kane, and he's terrified of it. So basically, right now, he's like, come on, Christians, we can rule if we try hard enough, if we all come together.
Imagine, if all Christians mobilized and voted, do you know what would happen?
And, basically, Dave ends up, like, winning the speech.
Don't be silent, don't let them push you into the shadows.
Like, Senator Kane acts all devastated, everyone's cheering for Dave, which is so funny because he literally just gave a Christian nationalist speech where he stopped talking to America and he was only talking to Christians at the end. He's like, now Christians, I'm talking to you, like, they know we can win, they know that our religion can take over the government and they're scared. Okay, I feel like this proves that he is a Christian nationalist and not for the people, because again, at the end, he's only addressing Christians. Why is he doing that if he wants what's good for everybody? He clearly is only interested in what Christians want. That's why he only addressed the Christians and not the American people at the end of his speech. And I guess everybody in that crowd just happened to be Christian because everybody was cheering, so I guess everyone there was a Christian nationalist. I don't know. This was fun. I just find it so funny that it's like, no, he's not a Christian nationalist just because he hit every single Christian nationalist talking point, and not because he was only speaking directly to Christians during his speech. That doesn't make him a Christian nationalist, guys. Just because he wants his religion to rule our government or country, that doesn't make him a Christian nationalist. Again, if somebody wanted to know what Christian nationalism was, I would literally just hand them this movie and be like, enjoy. Just like the last one. Even though I think this one showcases it a little more, even a little more so because of certain things included. Like them destroying certain monuments, like evil liberal people destroying monuments, vaccines, evolution, all that different stuff. Even though they did put it in the last movie, but I feel like it was a little less direct in some ways. Again, they do a lot of sugarcoating with Christian nationalist talking point, where they hit literally every single Christian nationalist talking point, and then they say, you know, that's what actually our founding fathers wanted it to be this way. We're actually a Christian nation, so Christianity should be a core part of our government, our country. It should be taught in public schools to every single child. But we don't want to force our Christianity onto you. We don't want to do that. We only want these things, which is like, it's like, yeah, what do you think people's issue is? Like, I guess in my mind, I'm like, what do you think people mean when they talk about Christian nationalism? Because you're describing what you're saying you want is exactly what we think Christian nationalism is. It was interesting to me whenever Senator Kane pointed out to Pastor Dave that one of Jesus' main teachings was love thy neighbor, and Pastor Dave was like, no, it's not. I think that's interesting because the way that Christian nationalism is going right now is very much like in a lot of ways it lacks a lot of empathy. You have to not put your empathy first, and I think that's why they specifically did this scene of like, no, that's not all Jesus had to say, that wasn't the main point. Because then they would have to alter their political views, right? And that's why you hear a lot of Christians talk about the sin of empathy. It was even a book that was pretty popular within the Christian community, which is obviously concerning. But they have to say these kind of things, or else when it comes to things like empathy, people will be like, wait, this doesn't feel right if the core messaging is love thy neighbor, right? So they have to tell people, hey, this actually isn't the main message, and sometimes empathy is not a good thing, and it can actually be a sin. So, and do I think love thy neighbor is the main point of the Bible? No, I don't. I think there's a lot of stuff in the Bible. I think there's a lot of contradicting things in the Bible. But again, they use it when they think it's useful, and they ignore it when they don't. For example, in the last movie, God's Not Dead 4, you heard Dave talk about when somebody said that, you know, putting Christianity and government in schools is divisive. Pastor Dave said, well, Jesus just said love your neighbor and like forgive everyone. How is that divisive? So they use it in those instances, but then in instances like this, they're like, well, that's not what all of our teachings are about. It's like, yes, we know that you pick and choose at different moments what you want to accomplish. We understand that. So for now, those are all the God's Not Dead movies. What a ride it's been. This has been pretty fun, but also pretty painful. Again, I think the thing that makes it so painful, the last two movies, is how intense Christian nationalism is right now. Let me know what you guys think about this movie. And I've gotten a lot of feedback as far as some movies you guys want me to review, so I have a list going. One movie I really want to do soon is the Left Behind movie with Nicolas Cage and Chad Michael Murray, because I think it's so funny that they're in that movie, and I just watched it for the first time a couple years ago, and it's just really funny to me, so I would like to do that. Eventually, I would like to do the whole Left Behind series. I also want to do a Christmas movie. I think it's called Christmas Spells. I want to do that soon, like, for the season, because why not? And then I'm also just going to be making deconstruction videos in general. I'm not going to just do movie reviews, but I feel like the movie reviews are good because it gives us great, like, things to talk about and what some of our issues are, and, you know, stuff that we've deconstructed in the past. So I just feel like it's a good outline sometimes to talk about certain topics. So yeah, if you want to give me more suggestions, feel free to leave it in the comments. I hope you guys are doing good. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.